I live in Coppell, which is less than a half hour from downtown Dallas and northeast of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. This North Texas city is home to several well-known companies, including an Amazon center, a Samsung warehouse, and 2 Fortune 500 companies, all of which offer job opportunities in the area. I enjoy walking the wooded trails or 5 miles of trails at Coppell Nature Park, or playing golf at River Chase Golf Club. At the newly renovated Andrew Brown Park, adults can play volleyball and children can find something to do in the playground. In Coppell, you can work out and get a massage at Fit by Design. I love stopping by for a cup of coffee and a protein bento, or chicken salad sandwich at George Coffee and Provisions, trying authentic Texas BBQ from Hard 8 BBQ, Mexican food by ordering enchiladas potosinas or tacos at Armando's Tacos. And of course, it is recommended to try the meatloaf, catfish basket, or pork chops at Miss Mary's Southern Kitchen. Previously, my interests were different, and the area had a completely different type of favorite places to visit. It was 2009, my friends and I were about 14 years old, and we loved abandoned buildings. One of these was an unfinished thermal power plant next to the old circus. If you've ever played the game Getting Up, I'll mention it later, then the atmosphere of the place reminded us of the abandoned pier from the 5th part of the game. It was clear from the signs on the walls that diggers often hung out here, but we rarely met people here. The place has its own name and legend, the heart of which is kept by the huge chimney of the plant, more than 150 meters high. This pipe, shortly before 2009, acquired the name of one girl, Janet, who committed suicide by jumping from the very top of this pipe. After this tragedy, her boyfriend wrote the name of his deceased companion in large letters on the pipe. This is how the place itself acquired its name. We loved to go to Janet to draw graffiti. At that time, we were very inspired by Mark Esco's game. In a safer place for this. The fact is that we were going to celebrate friends' birthdays there, we were going to just drink a little beer there, and someone even scheduled beefs and fights in this place because of its remoteness from prying eyes. So one summer Saturday, my friend Paul and I went painting. We had the task of making a piece while keeping track of time. The two of us had to learn how to cover the wall as quickly as possible. Teamwork makes the dream work. We were not particularly interested in underground structures, but we always carefully inspected the area for the presence of other people. That time we were surrounded by silence until we finished the drawing and began photographing the piece. I didn't hear anything then, but it seemed to Paul that someone was laughing outside, where that very pipe was located. When we ran out of the room into the street, we found no one. There was no sign of anyone's presence. When we returned back, we collected the cans, and I wildly wanted to climb to the very top of this pipe. I should note that I already did this during my birthday celebration at this location. Paul never liked this idea due to the dilapidation of the structure and the very rusty staircases to the top. I didn't take any paint with me because I thought nothing should be painted on this pipe other than Janet's name. I just wanted to look at the city from this height again. The way up was indeed very exciting. The ladders were shaking very much from the wind. The structures for workers were made in tiers on which one could stand at full height. But between these tiers there is only a rusty staircase, located in parts that are not always connected to each other. Having not reached the top a couple of tiers, I decided to take a breath and rest on the rebar platform. Paul was fooling around below with a lighter and a can of spray paint, spraying flames into the air and shouting something incoherent to me. Collecting my thoughts, I got to the top of the pipe, took a couple of photos, and began to climb down. In that very place, 2 tiers up to the top, I very clearly heard someone very close to me laughing and saying something in a language I didn't understand, if they were words at all. I distinctly remember that the pitch of the sound changed in an unnatural way, as if someone was turning the pitch knob in real time. I grabbed tightly into the fragile metal of the stairs and tried to look for something in the direction of the sound. It felt like the sounds were coming from the other side of the pipe, which frightened me even more because I didn't know who to run from and where. There was still about 100 meters to the ground, but I tried my best to take my time so as not to make a fatal mistake. I began to move further down. A second later, I saw someone run along the metal ledges around the pipe, on the tier directly above me. I still can't identify this creature. These were clearly human silhouettes, but even now, everything in my memory looks like a paranormal artifact. In a panic that I tried with all my might to control, I went down tier after tier. Paul shouted something to me from below, but I didn't pay attention, although I noticed notes of concern in his voice. As I was approaching the ground, Paul clearly made it clear to me that we needed to get out of here. Then I was overcome with fear of danger on Earth. When I reached the first tier, I jumped down to Paul and we both ran as fast as we could. Already at a stop along the road, Paul told me that he again heard laughter and screams from rooms, probably underground. When I told him what I saw and heard, we were both horrified, because the source could not be in two places at the same time. This was clearly some kind of devilry. A couple of years later, the pipe was demolished by a directed explosion of 200 kilograms explosives. Not long ago, I was divorced and began to get used to living alone. I have a small house in a poor area of Springdale, Arkansas. It's not like I would call it the danger zone. Still, sometimes I do feel a little uncomfortable. I don't know a lot of my neighbors too well, other than my next door neighbors. The houses across the street are a different story. I like knowing my neighbors because it makes me feel a little safer living alone. That day, I was very tired and returned from work late, but I knew for sure that I would sleep well that night, even without taking melatonin. The following night, I was awoken to something outside my window, like a singular crack or tap. It must have been the window frame. It was late summer, so I had the windows open for air. So I guess, out of pure instincts, I said, "Who's there?" I didn't hear anything after that. I got up and lifted my blind, and no one was outside. 2 nights in a row of this, I was starting to think I was getting paranoid over the smallest things, like regular house noises. I have experienced such attacks of paranoia before. Then nothing dangerous really threatened my life. It was a game of the mind, which in anxiety drew terrible pictures. So I tried to fall back asleep, but that same night I woke up again. This time to some scratching or scraping sound from the backyard. I heard it through the window. I got up from my bed and went out to the little living space by the back door. I heard the clicking louder now. It was right outside this sliding door. I turned on the light in the living space, and then the sound stopped. I went over to the sliding door, which is covered by a sliding curtain. I was so scared to pull it, expecting to see someone, but when I yanked it open like a band-aid, no one was there. I flicked on the backyard light and slid open the door. I was relieved to see no one out there, including raccoons or some other pests. I listened to the crickets for a minute, then heard something in my tiny yard, something rustling in the bush. I looked at the bushes. They're too thick to really see anything, but they're definitely a good place for someone to hide. And if that sound wasn't a raccoon or possum, I didn't want to know what it was. I went back inside. At that moment, someone knocked on my front door, which only sped me up on my way to my room, where I locked myself. I made sure everything was locked. I didn't hear any more knocks, but I was ready to call the police, because I wasn't expecting anyone at night. I somehow fell asleep eventually after that. The next day, I bought a security camera set and called my sister Anne. She helped me install it all and spent that night with me to make me feel safe. We were both in our own beds trying to sleep when I got an alert on my phone, motion detected on my property. And suddenly, we both heard sounds like someone was trying to break into the house. I immediately opened the camera app and noticed that the camera at the front entrance was not working. I told Anne to call the police immediately. I myself understood that the police still needed time to get to my house. I took a knife and shouted loudly towards the door that the police were on their way and that we were armed. The sounds of the door stopped, and I thought I heard someone running away. Nevertheless, we didn't come up with anything better than to hide in my room until the police arrived. After waiting for the officers, together with them we studied the recordings from the surveillance cameras. The front door camera captured a man in a black hoodie covering the camera with spray paint. This means that he had penetrated here before, knew that cameras were now installed, and specifically took this can of spray with him. We couldn't identify the man's face. He had a hood over his head and was wearing all dark clothing, but not in a single frame could we see his face. He was also wearing gloves, which meant he left no fingerprints. According to information from the police, they did not receive such statements from neighbors at that time. They then looked after me for some time. Nothing like this ever happened again, but I greatly strengthened the security system, got myself a dog, and a Glock. To this day, I think it's very important to know every neighbor you share the street with, because you never know. You just never know. My sister was worried about me so much. She thought I would become paranoid again, and might even have to move out of this house. But, to my own surprise, this story even cheered me up. Now I devote a lot of time to self-defense, and it brings me pleasure. Now I have a faithful friend named Mike, and a circle of new interests. Sometimes I even thank God for that terrible night because, after all, it changed my life for the better. But things could have been much worse. 3 years ago, my parents divorced, and I began to live with my mother because we were much closer. I was 15 years old then. My father had a thriving business, and my mother didn't need money after the divorce. Plus, we had our own small ranch. That's where I really always loved to spend my time at. So was the summer of 2021. This was one of the many weeks that my mom was at our beach house, and I was alone at the main house. I'm used to having the house to myself more often than not. The setup in the main house is a kitchen, living room, and 2 bedrooms upstairs, and then the same thing on the first floor, and then a basement. My bedroom is in the upstairs. I mainly use the kitchen and living room up there too, while my mom uses the downstairs for herself. It's a nice setup, but most of all, I liked growing plants, vegetables, and taking care of the garden at the ranch. I really enjoyed digging in the soil, observing the flowering cycles of plants, and harvesting the fruits of my own soil. Often I was in the greenhouse. It is made of polycarbonate, which allows the walls of the greenhouse to play with colors in sunny weather, especially when it rains. At first, it somehow seemed to me as if someone was running in the garden. Not finding anyone outside, I noticed the iridescent colors on the cover of the greenhouse. It was a greenhouse effect, I thought, and it happened a couple more times. But everything is not as rosy as it seemed to me then. Then suddenly my clothes started disappearing. I'd call my mom anytime this happened if she wasn't home, and asked if she'd moved anything out of my clothing baskets. Usually she'd say no, since we live in separate floors of the house. But even this couple of weeks that I was home alone, an extended period of time, I was noticing some of my favorite shirts were missing. My room is usually pretty messy, admittedly, but even after digging through everything, I couldn't find a bunch of specific pieces of clothing. I came up with the idea that maybe one of my friends or multiple friends took my clothes for whatever reason. Or more realistically, that they'd eventually just come up on their own, and I just left it at that. When I'm alone, I sleep with the door cracked open, just so I could hear if, God forbid, someone were trying to break in. I was watching a movie on my laptop when my bedroom door suddenly shut. It didn't slam, but it didn't exactly close softly either. I had the ceiling fan on, and both windows, so I thought maybe it was a draft. It does sometimes happen. But then I heard something from outside my bedroom down in the hall. I got out of bed and ran to the door and opened it. The hallway light was off. I turned it on and nobody was there. I wasn't satisfied yet, though. I went downstairs to my mom's floor and looked around in her room, kitchen, and living room. But then I noticed the basement door ajar. The light switch for the basement is right at the stairs. It's a string you pull down. I went down into the basement, the relatively unused basement. There's just a couch, TV, a few workout machines, and a small room with a punching bag down there. There's also 4 doors that lead to closets, and a smaller door you have to crouch down into to get into this little crawlspace type closet. Neither my mom nor I really go down there at all. I caught through my peripheral vision. The little door to the crawlspace closet moved just a little bit. My heart literally dropped, but I approached it just a little bit. I stopped, and now felt like my heart just completely stopped as well, when an arm came out from the darkness of the little closet and pulled the door ever so lightly shut. I quietly but quickly went back up the stairs, wanting to run and be out of this house. I called 911 first thing and reported that there was a stranger in my house. The police showed up with their lights on, but not their sirens. All 4 of them came down to the basement with me, and they ordered the person in the closet out. It turned out to be Mr. Tong, who worked as a gardener for us under my father. He barely spoke English, we rarely communicated back then, and I barely even recognized him then. He had his hands up, and he was wearing one of my shirts. In fact, inside of the crawling closet were a number of my mom and I's belongings, mostly clothing. As it turned out a little later, during Mr. Tong's conversation with the police and my mother, my father fired him a long time ago, but he never found a job. He did not plan to live there for a long time, but he could not find any other way out for himself. Then I immediately realized that I was wrong about the effect of the greenhouse walls. I was seeing a real person.